Let's look at what the correct solution should be for the lab exam, and it's important to read the requirements closely. So if we look at those, we see that essentially if the blood alcohol concentration is 0.020 or more, the cyclist is going to be fined. Okay, and depending on the BSc level, there are 3 levels of fines. So these 3 numbers do not vary: 50, 100 euros and 500 euros. They do not vary. So they should be stored in constant variables. Because they're euros, currency, 2 places of decimals, use final double rather than final int. I know it looks like they're ints, but you know, keep in mind their currency, so doubles would be better to use in there. And then another final constant we are going to use is this 50% situation here. Okay, the fine, if the lighting fine is applied, it always multiplies. There's always a 50% factor, so there's always a 0.05 factor. Okay, so that's very important to realize. And notice this line here, this is really important too. Okay, nothing is displayed if there's no fine. Okay, so in terms of when you're being asked for something, always be thinking what's invalid data. Okay, BAC, a negative BAC, that is invalid. Okay, that's the only situation where we've got invalid data. If you have 0.1 of a BSc, that's not invalid. That just means you're going to be fined 500. However, if your BSc is 0.01, okay, that's good news. That means that your blood alcohol concentration is low. That means you won't be fined. Okay, and more good news. If your BSc is 0.01, that means that even if you have a faulty lighting on your bike, you're not going to be fined. Okay, so you're only fined for faulty lighting if your BAC is 0.02 or more. Okay, so that's what I mean by relatively high BAC. And it's really important in an exam situation, or if you're doing coding for anybody. You know, if there's anything you're not clear about, ask. Okay, you need to clarify it. Do not be afraid to ask, because if you don't ask and you end up coding something you're not clear about, there's a high possibility you are going to code it incorrectly. Okay, so if your blood alcohol concentration is less than 0, we should be getting an output saying that there's invalid data. Okay, that's what you're asked to add in part E. If your blood alcohol concentration is between 0 and 0.019, okay, nothing should be displayed. Okay, so you should not be asked about your faulty lighting, and you should not be telling the user there's no fine. Okay, nothing is a very clear word, and nothing is displayed if there's no fine. Okay, faulty lighting. Basically, how could you code this? Well, you could use a string to store the value from the keyboard. If you could say if faulty lighting equals y, if faulty lighting equals n, if faulty lighting equals yes or no, or you could use an integer 1 or 0 or 1 or 2, or you could use a Boolean variable. Okay, if the user types true, if the user types false. And that can be kind of handy because a Boolean variable has only got 2 possible values. So if neither true nor false has been typed, you're going to get an exception error straight away. Okay, now notice here, so the output, you can see there's a formatting, colons are all in nice row, so you should be using printf here for the output. Okay, and similarly for the cyclist name, you should use actually you could use printline for that, or printf indeed. It doesn't matter, you don't need place of decimals for the cyclist name, so printf not necessarily needed, but you definitely need printf for these four. Okay, also you need three variables to do with the fine, three variables that are not constant variables. Okay, basic fine, the faulty lighting fine, which is going to be 0.5 of the basic fine. Okay, so if there's a basic fine, there's a faulty lighting fine. Okay, if there's no basic fine, there's no faulty lighting fine. Okay, and the total fine is just going to be the sum of these two. So three variables needed there. Three place of decimals, so printf for the BAC percentage 0.3 f. For these, printf and percentage 0.2 f. Okay, and f in that case means floating point decimal, which is what we use in printf for dealing with doubles. Okay, so let's run the code, and then we will look at the code. Okay, so just a matter of courtesy, it's always nice to humanize the input from the user. So let's ask for a name first, some human information. Okay, BAC reading. If I put -0.4, okay, I'm getting a helpful error message. It's telling me where I went wrong, and it's suggesting a positive action I can do. So try again. Okay, so let's try again. Okay, so I'm going to put in a low BAC, and let's see what happens. Okay, notice nothing is being output. Okay, because that's what I am asked for. Okay, nothing is displayed if there's no fine. Yeah, so that's good. So let's deal with the fine again. So cyclist name, okay, shorter, 0.025. Okay, false, faulty lighting, true or false. So let me write false here. So there should be no lighting fine, and there we go. Okay, and you can see my output there is formatted correctly. Okay, so 50, 0, total of 50. Let's run it again. Okay, 0.025, and let's say this time there is a problem. Okay, so now my total fine should be 75. There we go. And then 0.05, let's go into the middle zone here, and let's say false here. So this time my fine is 100, okay, and there's no faulty lighting fine. And this time there is a faulty lighting, so it's 150 in total there. And then finally, okay, the high BAC. It's going to be €500 fine, no faulty lighting, so total of 500. And then BAC 0.087, this time there is a problem. So now we're going to be 750, the total fine. Okay, so that's the way the program has to work. So let's look at the code. How am I doing all this? Okay, so I've got my, maybe make it a bit bigger. I've got my four final doubles there, 3 for the fines, okay, and then 1 for the lighting penalty of 0.5. I am just initializing this at the start, a basic fine of 0. I have been, sorry, just make it a bit more human, asking for the cyclist name first. Okay, and then the BAC reading, keyboard.next double. Notice meaningful names, okay, meaningful name, meaningful name, meaningful name, meaningful name. Meaningful name. Okay, your variable should also be meaningful names. If you are using final for constants, you can see you don't tend to use camel case for this. You use capital letters and then use underscores to separate the words, whereas here's camel case. You can see the second word starts with a capital F. Okay, so dealing with invalid data, if the BAC is less than 0, tell the user there's a problem. Try again. Okay, else. So this time, okay, the BAC, when I go into line 41, that means the BAC is 0 or more. Okay, but we should realize that we need to deal with if the BAC is between 0 and 0.019, and this time we're dealing with it by doing nothing. Okay, so what we actually need to do is if the blood alcohol level is 0.02 or more. Okay, now I have to be careful here, so I'm going to deal with the high fine first, because this condition is true if the BAC is 0.08, okay, that condition is true. So I need to deal with the BAC of 0.08 first, okay, and then I apply the middle fine if it's between 0.05 and 0.079, and then finally if it's between 0.02 and 0.049. Okay, and I don't need to output these here because I'm dealing with them in the formatted output in part 3. Okay, so notice where I am now. Okay, I'm inside the BAC being 0 or more. Okay, and then applying the lighting fine, that is only going to happen if the BAC is 0.02 or more. Okay, here is my next Boolean this time, okay, for lighting fault check. And by using Boolean variable, we're dealing with invalid data automatically, because we can only type in true or false here. And then if true, use that 0.05 constant. Okay, so you can see here, the light fine is starting off at 0. I'm doing that before I'm checking the Boolean. Okay, so light fine is default 0. Total fine is just set at the basic fine. So I'm only adjusting those two if there is a lighting fine problem. Okay, so then total fine, I'm just adding those two together. Okay, and then finally my output. And if you look at the story here, I'm using printf in all cases. Percentage %s is to output a string in the middle of a printf statement. Okay, and then 3 places decimals for the BAC and 2 places decimals for the total fine. Okay, and you have to really experiment with the number of tabs that you need. Okay, so you can see faulty lighting fine is a long text, so I just need 1 tab. Okay, whereas the total fine, I need 2 tabs. Okay, so that's the output. But remember, the output is only going to appear if there is a fine in the first place. Okay, so you can see my brackets here. Where does that bracket close? That bracket closes here if there is a fine. Okay, so if there is a fine for a BAC, then you ask about faulty lighting. Okay, otherwise you don't. Okay, so just running it once more. Cyclist name. In fact, let's run it while we're looking at the output here. Okay, and let's just compare the output here. Okay, so you can see name, BAC, basic fine, total fine. I'm using two tabs for that. Faulty lighting fine, just using 1 tab.